Ever since I started living at this house, weird things have happened. It regularly sounds like someone is walking on the outside of the house at night, and it's starting to freak me and my roommates out. For some context, this is a college house, 4 girls in our 20s just looking for a fun place to live. There have been a few different encounters that have led us to this conclusion, and it only continues to fall into place. Let's go back to this summer when the first break-in was. An evening in September in the middle of the week. The garage has never been used by us other than for storage, opened, and one of us was at home with music blasting. She heard it and didn't think anything of it, but about 5 minutes later went upstairs to check and found our garage door open and back door unlocked. Again, we do not use our garage. She looked around and found nothing missing and figured it was an accident. About a month later, we were having a party. It was around Halloween, and we decided to have a costume party. Around 12 to 1 a.m., someone was in our backyard and turned to see a man walking up the side of our house. When the man saw him, he ran away and up the hill. We also around this time had one of our car's windows broken. Nothing was stolen, just the window was broken. Last night while driving around, we noticed a car we had seen drive by a few times and followed it up the hill. The man in this car, a middle-aged white man, very receding hairline and arms covered in tattoos, comes to a complete stop in the middle of the street and turns around to look at us and then pulls to the side of the road. He waited there for a few minutes and we waited one street over. We saw him turn and left and followed him into the neighborhood in front of ours. We lost sight of him and drove around the neighborhood a bit more. When driving in front of our house, we were wondering if anyone behind could see into our rooms and went to look in the street behind. The house that had direct view into my room happened to have this same car that was driving around our house sitting right in front of it. This car is very distinct. It's an old white sedan with a black shoe mark on the rear bumper. We immediately went back to our house and looked out the window at the house and realized we had seen someone there before. On multiple separate occasions, there was a middle-aged man standing in the window looking at our house or sitting on the back porch in a lawn chair facing our house. Last night when we went to bed, my roommate had her window open and heard footsteps, our fence gate open, and car doors. The footsteps sounded like they were directly outside her window, and I also heard them. It was a Friday night and I had gone to bed early, as I had work on Saturday morning. After reading in bed for a bit, I drifted off at around 10:30 p.m., only to wake up about an hour later to loud screams and people yelling profanities. I thought my girlfriend was watching a movie with the volume way up, and I went out into the lounge room to ask her to turn it down a little. Instead, the TV was off, and my girlfriend was staring at the front door with her eyes wide. Our apartment is on the ground floor of the building, and so our front door opens directly out into the lobby of the building. The voices in question were coming directly from the lobby. I could not make out specifics. In my defense, I was half asleep, and the language of the country I live in is not my first language, but there was a lot of swearing involved. My first thought was that it was some kind of domestic dispute, but after listening, I realized it was a group of men that sounded extremely aggressive. I looked at the WhatsApp group chat for my apartment building, and to my horror saw a message from one of the people in it that there were armed men in the building and that we should not leave our flats. The country I live in is experiencing a marked uptick in crime, and I had heard stories of armed groups of men robbing entire apartment blocks, but these had seemed fairly apocryphal to me. However, that was my first thought, that these men would kick down our door and rob us. One of my dogs started to growl at the commotion outside. I shushed him, and thankfully he obeyed. I heard a commotion in the apartment above me and went out to my patio to see what was happening. I heard what sounded like a large piece of furniture being knocked over, and women and children screaming in terror. At this point, I had no idea what was going on, but I knew that by now they would have robbed us already, if that is what they had planned to do. My girlfriend and I decided to hide in a small shed at the end of our patio, monitoring the group chat on our phones. Our bigger dog silently stood watch outside the door of the shed, his eyes locked on the sliding door at the end of the patio. I would find my smaller dog later, cowering between the washing machine and the dryer. After 10 extremely tense minutes, I heard the screeching of tires, signaling what I hoped was the perpetrators fleeing the scene. Eventually, someone in the group chat said the police had arrived, and breathing a huge sigh of relief, I came out of hiding and opened the front door. Alarmingly, on the floor of the lobby there were zip ties that had been cut, and the security guard was talking to one of the tenants. The man was bleeding from a large gash on his face and looked extremely shaken. Over the next few hours, the story would unfold. The man I saw with the gash on his face was the tenant in the upstairs apartment, the one that I had heard the commotion coming from. He was the owner of an import-export business and for whatever reason, had a sizable sum of money, in cash, hidden in his apartment. Someone had obviously found out about it and planned out the robbery that woke me from my sleep on Friday night. A group of 8 men had followed him into the apartment building's garage and ambushed him as he got out of his car, and judging from the gash on his face, roughed him up a bit. Some of the group of 8 had gone to the lobby, surprised security guard, and zip-tied him. The remainder of the group had gone up to the apartment, robbed it, and then fled the scene. It is fairly chilling to think that armed men were mere meters from my front door. This happened some years ago. I was 20, I think. I was going on a road trip of a sort with a really good friend of mine and his family. Our destination was a concert in a country next to ours, but we would be stopping at night to sleep in the camper we drove in. We hadn't crossed the border yet when we stopped at the first campsite for the night. Now it seemed like a pretty family-friendly and safe place, so none of us had our guards up or anything. That night at about 11 p.m. or so, while my friend and his family was getting ready for bed, I went outside to get some fresh air. Our camper was almost completely next to the beach, so I went down to the shore to dip my feet and get some much-needed quiet time by myself. On the way there, I passed by a beach shack, a detail that will be important later. As I stood there letting the waves lap over my feet, I noticed the silhouette of a man further down the beach, but it was a public space for campers, so I didn't think much of it. After being absorbed by splashing in the water with my feet and enjoying the moonlight, I decided to make my way back. Of course, it was very dark given the late hour, but I don't scare easily. Now, as a woman in the modern world, I usually do stay on my guard after dark, but that thought never occurred to me since I felt I was in a safe environment so close to the campsite. Anyways, as I was walking back, I noticed that the silhouette of the man further down the beach was gone. But even more worrying was the fact that, as I was nearing the beach shack, I saw that someone seemed to be trying to hide from my view behind it. Immediately, I was on alert and called a friend I knew would be awake. I gave the shack a wide berth while talking loudly to my friend about how she was coming to meet me. After not too long, I got safely back to the campsite and hopped in bed in the caravan. I didn't tell my friend or his family because even though I was scared, there could have been many logical, non-threatening answers to what I saw. I put it out of mind, and the rest of the trip went off without a hitch. About a year or so later, I was talking to my friend about the trip and suddenly remembered the creepy experience. As I told him, he slowly got pale though, and told me something his brother had told him and his family over breakfast some months after the trip. That same night, after I had gotten back and gone to bed, his brother had gotten up late at night to get some water, but when he passed the window right by his bed, he saw a man standing right there outside looking in the window. As soon as he was seen, the man left, but it definitely creeped out the brother a lot, but just like me, he seemed to put it out of his mind. Now with both of those stories, it doesn't seem far-fetched that the man hiding by the beach shack had followed me back. I really am scared to think about what would have happened if I had been alone.